Hi, I'm Jazmin Murphy. You could call me Sunny. And I want you to think of the term environmentalism and the concept of outdoorsmanship in the United States. What do you imagine when you hear those terms? What images creep up in your mind? If you're like most Americans, well, maybe some Americans, you might conjure up an image of a lean, white woman or man hiking up a mountainside in the broad daylight on a cloudless day. And while this isn't necessarily a bad image, don't you wonder why that's the first thing you think of?
What counts as being an environmentalist, and what counts as environmentalism? So I think part of the answer to the question of how do we combat, for example, some of the stereotypes and perceptions that minorities and lower income Americans are concerned about these issues. Well, one of the things that happens, I think, is that when it comes to gauging environmental engagement, quote unquote, I don't think we actually do a very good job of that.
It turns out this partiality towards white people in the U.S. outdoor recreation industry is deeply rooted in Jim Crow era segregation laws and social customs. For example, the park meant for Bullitt County, designed specifically for Negroes or colored people, the Negro parks were often separated from those meant for white people by geographic barriers such as just plain old distance or tree lines or ridge lines. In some cases, they were even separated by chemical plants. At the same time, Negro parks were often smaller and much lower quality and less maintained than those designed for white people. Still, Black people participated in outdoor recreation and even conservation, sometimes right alongside white people.
New Jersey, widely known as the Garden State because of the quiet natural beauty of her countryside, is the second most densely populated state in the Union, second only to Rhode Island, the nation's toy-in area. 1/4 of her people live in 6 bustling active cities, each having a population of more than 100,000. Keenly do these people, many of them workers in high-speed modern factories, appreciate the need of parks and areas for outdoor recreation. Happy-go-lucky Negro boys comprise one of the groups of Conservation Corps workers in the Berlin area. And inevitably, when 2 or 3 of these are gathered together, the boys are housed in comfortable barracks in the immediate vicinity of the park and are able to constantly enjoy many of the scenic beauties which have been arranged for the visiting public. This opportunity to see new and interesting things is a phase of the Conservation Corps work in relation to the enrollees, which is considered highly important as an educational influence. The formal recreational features in this Camden County Park are already well developed, and some of the work now being done has to do with the further improvement of these facilities. In some sections, there are areas which have long demanded drainage for mosquito control. When the Conservation Corps workers leave Camden County, they will have added many usable acres to this park. Thick undergrowth, where fire might easily start, is being cleared out. Trees in many beautiful little groves are being given more room and more sunlight. Someday these groves will be tall forests, for these reservations are the property of the public and will always be held sacred to the use and enjoyment of the people.
Although many white people believed their jurisdictions were adhering to the separate but equal standards set by the Plessy versus Ferguson Supreme Court decision in 1896, the parks were always separate but rarely equal. A paper from the Savannah Tribune in 1958 read, "Overlooked. We cannot describe the state of mind we find ourselves in as we note two items in reports to the press as of last Monday. One item concerned the city's recreation program, which was reported as, quote, growing by leaps and bounds, end quote. Lighted tennis courts, hard surfacing, and other improvements on clay courts, and a new bathhouse and a repaired boardwalk at the swimming pool constituted some of the general improvements completed at Daffin Park. The bathhouse at the Negro swimming pool is in bad repair. There are leaks in the concrete wall. The one tennis court at the swimming pool is too short. The recreation center is deteriorating, and activities there are inadequately supervised. Conditions at these two places are bad. It might be better to close these places than to let them go on as at present, and they have gone on for the past 2 years. From what we see, it's good enough for Negroes' attitude describes the feeling of the city toward recreation facilities for Negroes. Negroes make up too large a segment of this city's citizenry to be neglected in so important a manner. Besides, such negligence places Savannah behind many smaller cities in its provision of recreation facilities for Negroes. Adequate recreational facilities have the same value for Negroes as they have for white children. Another publication by the Savannah Tribune in 1957 read, Race Relations in New Orleans. In another action, a group of students from a public school visited the city park with permission of the Orleans Parish School Board. They were accompanied by their teacher, Miss Olivia Evans. Park officials tried to force them to leave the park, but they refused to do so until their bus returned for them. They did not use the park facilities, but walked about and looked at the things long forbidden to Negroes. Park officials are quoted as saying, Negroes were not even permitted to walk through the park. City Park has been enjoined from refusing Negroes entrance by the federal court, but most people are awaiting an appeal from the decision by park officials before trying to use park facilities. The problem of segregation in outdoor recreation was not unique to parks facilities. In fact, it extended to outdoor recreation in places such as beaches. For example, in Maryland, African Americans brought up the case to challenge local authorities on segregation on local beaches. This story from the Savannah Tribune in 1954 reads, Appeal 2 Maryland segregation cases. The individuals challenged an authority that upheld Jim Crow policy and the segregation of Negroes at 2 public beaches, and they sought injunctions restraining the operators from segregating users of the beaches because of race. The paper reads, one is the Dawson case, brought against the City of Baltimore and the corporation operating the city-owned public beach at Fort Smallwood Park in 1950. Robert Dawson and other Negroes were denied the use of the beach and facilities solely because of their race. No such facilities were available to Negroes in Baltimore. On March 2nd, 1951, the court ordered the operators of the beach to cease its discrimination against Negroes, but certain days were set aside by the operators for the beach to be used by each racial group. However, in 1952, the construction of a segregated beach for Negroes was authorized. The Negroes petitioned the court to order Fort Smallwood Park to be open to all persons without regard to race or color. While the defendants, which included the mayor and city director of the Department of Recreation and Parks, the Board of Recreation and Parks, and the corporation which operated the facilities, acknowledged the demand, the beach was completed and has been operated as a Jim Crow setup since. Negroes have been refused admittance to the other beach since the completion of the one set aside for the exclusive use of Negroes. The operator claimed that segregation was consistent with the 14th Amendment, which called for equality of physical facilities. On May 27, 1954, 10 days after the U.S. Supreme Court decision in the school segregation cases, a motion for judgment was filed based on the fact that segregation is a violation of the federal Constitution. On July 27th, the court denied the motion on the ground that the May 17th decision did not outlay segregation in recreational facilities, and on August 25th entered final judgment and dismissed the complaint with costs. The other suit is Lonesome case, which sought an injunction against the state commissioners of forests and parks and the superintendent of Sandy Point State Park and Beach on the ground that the maintenance of segregated beaches and bathing facilities constitute a violation of the federal Constitution. All facilities in the Sandy Point State Park and Beach, a public recreation center owned and operated by the state, are open to all persons on a non-discriminatory basis, except the beach and bathing facilities. The state operates the South Beach for the exclusive use of white persons and the East Beach for Negroes. On July 4th, 1952, Milton Lonesome and several Negroes sought admission to the South Beach, but were personally escorted to the East Beach by employees of the beach. They refused to use the Jim Crow Beach on the ground that the facilities did not and would not, quote, afford complete and wholesome recreation, end quote. On August 8th, Lonesome filed his complaint. Park officials answered on September 30th, claiming that the facilities in the segregated beach were equal to those at the all-white beach. But on June 2nd, 1953, the court issued a preliminary injunction that the facilities were not equal. However, the court dismissed the complaint on July 9th, claiming that the facilities at East Beach were equal to those at South Beach due to certain improvements made at the Negro Beach. In their brief consolidating both cases and filed with the U.S. Court of Appeals, NAACP legal defense attorneys argue that state-imposed restrictions on publicly owned and operated facilities are forbidden by the 14th Amendment. Further, they say, there are no state or city ordinances requiring or specifically authorizing the practice of racial segregation anywhere in the state of Maryland. The practice and policy of racial segregation are self-delegated, legal defense attorneys assert, and do not conflict with any local law. Therefore, the sole issue involved in both cases is whether the authorities have the right to bar Negro bathers from any state or city-owned and operated public recreational facilities. The lower court's decisions should be reversed, the lawyers say in their appeal, because their opinions were based on the false doctrine of separate but equal, which has been denounced by the U.S. Supreme Court as outdated and cannot be used as a yardstick for general application. The cases will be argued jointly on January 11th in Charlotte, North Carolina. NAACP legal defense attorneys for Dawson and Lonesome are Linwood Coger Jr. and Tucker R. Deering, both of Baltimore, and Thurgood Marshall, Director Counsel, Robert L. Carter, and Jack Greenberg of legal defense staff in New York. Another publication by the Savannah Tribune in 1945 read, "Segregation exists in many respects. Except for Bell, schools are for the most part strictly all white or all Negro. There is discrimination in downtown theaters and in public parks. A race riot threatened in 1929 because members of a Polish community bordering the Negro section objected to Negroes using a park which the Poles looked upon as their own. Since that time, a special park has been built in the Negro area with a golf course, tennis courts, swimming pool, and similar facilities, and Negro use of other parks is discouraged. It is charged that this policy was dictated by the financial interests controlling the mills on which the city is solely dependent economically. In some cases, Black people even reinforced segregation customs themselves. In a newspaper publication by the Topeka Daily State Journal on October 19, 1921, a section read, "Lashed with big whip, Texarkana, Texas, October 19th. Lashed with a big whip until their backs were badly lacerated, an unidentified white man and a Negro woman were severely punished by a number of Negro men when they were found together near the Negro ballpark there. The Negro woman was first whipped," officers who invested the case said, "and when the white man started to run, he was caught and given a like number of lashes with the big whip." Apart from social customs, there were severe consequences to breaking segregation laws. For example, if a Black person was dissatisfied with the Negro parks, they couldn't just simply go visit a white person's park. That could land them in jail, where they could be manipulated into peonage, which was basically indentured servitude. Worse than that, they could be lynched. In 1921, the press and banner of Abbeville, South Carolina read, "Over in Georgia, a wealthy planter is on trial charged with murder. Like a great many farmers who operate on a large scale, this farmer was accustomed to take Negroes charged with crime out of jail and work them pending trial. And it is charged that, like the farmers in other sections, he found one excuse and then another to keep these Negroes on the farm and from attending court and standing trial. Out of his practices due charges of peonage." Following these charges, preferred by the federal authorities in Georgia, it is also charged that a wholesale slaughter of Negroes took place. Every Negro who it was thought would give testimony against the defendant being murdered by either Williams or by his orders. So far, 11 bodies have been recovered, which it is charged are the bodies of his victims. Lynching was a severely traumatic, barbaric practice that lasted throughout the United States, primarily in the South, up until the 50s and likely beyond that. These maps from the early 1900s show just how widespread this practice was and how long it lasted. The social, legal, and quite literally life-threatening consequences of breaking segregation laws, whether on purpose or on accident, kept many Black people out of outdoor recreation and actively dissuaded them from spending time in natural spaces. And what would you do as a mother, father, sibling, friend, anyone who had a loved one who happened to be Black? You'd likely tell them to stay home or stay only in the parks that they had access to, which was not many, and less than that in good condition. The dream of spending time with your family and friends in these beautiful, scenic places quickly dissolved to nothing but a dream for many African Americans. Fortunately, the United States did make some progress by enforcing desegregation and combating such blatant racism in public places with the 1964 Civil Rights Act, even though they did try to enforce such desegregation with previous legislation. Still, the whites in the United States were not happy, and local and federal governments often had to take extreme measures to ensure Black people were treated equally.
This is Little Rock, Arkansas, 1957, when Negro students encountered violence in their attempt to register at a previously all-white school. Traditionally in the South, schools had been segregated. So it is not surprising that there was opposition when the Supreme Court ordered schools to integrate. But violence could not be tolerated. President Eisenhower ordered in federal troops to support the rights of the Negro students. To the eyes of the world, the fact of violence tended to obscure the true meaning of Little Rock. Its importance was that it demonstrated to those who opposed integration that they would ultimately have to give way.
This history is still potent in the United States outdoor recreation industry. Although many of the nation's outdoor recreation hotspots are in places with some of the largest Black communities in the nation, Black people still make up only 9% of outdoor recreation participants. At the same time, 1/3 of Black people identify as environmentalists. Further, even, many Black people self-reportedly enjoy outdoor activities such as running, jogging, trail running, mountain biking, fly fishing, saltwater fishing, freshwater fishing, hiking, and camping. At the same time, we are still painfully aware of the historical and present societal pressures and cultural norms that keep us from outdoor recreation, at least keep us from participating comfortably and while feeling safe. Unfortunately, it seems that many white Americans are less aware of this reality. A recent survey by the Pew Research Center asked Americans what they think about race relations in the United States today. Participants were asked whether they agreed or disagreed with the following statements. 1. The legacy of slavery affects the position of Black people in American society today, either a great deal or a fair amount. 84% of Black people agreed with this, while only 58% of white people did. Another statement read, race relations in the United States are generally bad. 71% of Black people agreed with this, while only 56% of white people did. Thirdly, another statement read, the United States hasn't done enough to ensure equal rights for Black and white Americans. While 78% of Black people agreed with this, only 37% of white people did. It is clear that Black and white Americans live in completely different realities. This is why it is crucial to bring more attention to Black representation in outdoor recreation, and continue to work toward making Black people and other non-white demographics feel safe, comfortable, and welcome in outdoor spaces.
We broadly in society, and inclusive of environmental organizations, nonprofits, I think traditionally, there's been a tendency to use membership in those organizations, or would you call yourself a quote-unquote environmentalist, use that label, or charitable giving, or amount of outdoor recreation time that one pursues, all to gauge kind of interest in environmental issues. And if people are not indicating agreement with those things, then they're kind of put in the category of not concerned about the environment. The irony is, I think, these, of course, all those things are also measures of means and access and opportunity.
Right.
So those can be highly problematic ways of gauging engagement. I think some of what may be occurring is that we in society, that is across wide segment of the U.S. public, there may be a common tendency to use some of those same ways to engage environmental concern, even within communities that are disproportionately affected among communities of color. So, and to the extent that's the case, if there's a sort of a shared tendency to use the same metrics, then we can come to the same conclusions, even if we're talking about our own community. So I think that's one piece of the puzzle, is sort of what counts as environmentalism, and how narrow is our conception there.
The historic exclusion of Black people in outdoor recreation within the United States is the main reason why organizations and events such as Black Girls Hike RVA, Outdoor Afro, and Black Birders Week are so important. They help to overcome the generational trauma that keeps Black and other non-white groups out of natural spaces. Additionally, they help us to address the history that we've been trying to bury for so long, but that still affects our present day. Thank you for watching. I'm Jazmin Murphy. You can call me Sunny, and I can't wait to see you in the next video.